That was you.
Oh, sorry, Lou. Sorry.
That's okay.
I didn't hear any music.
Oh, you didn't hear any music. Okay, you can see the picture though, right?
I could just see Gita, yes. I could see the picture, yes.
And when it comes back to showing you,
Then I heard it, but I didn't know if I was supposed to start speaking because this is the first time since we started I've
why
not
did?
heard the music.
Yeah, I don't know why you didn't hear the music. That's interesting.
Should I just start talking now?
No, I'll run the opening again, but when the picture comes to you, that's when you start talking.
All right. Now, do I need to go to a different thing or link or just on this?
No, I'm just going to start this over again, and then I'll edit out the beginning.
Okay.
That work for you?
Yeah.
Okay. Trying to figure out why you didn't hear it though. Funny, because I did for the first time.
For the first.
So that's kind of interesting. You know what? Just for the hell of it. Yeah, okay. We'll just start it again.
Okay.
I'm going to go to this.
Yeah.
And you hear the opening, and when the picture shows you,
Yep.
start talking.
Okay.
All right.
Welcome, friends. Glad you could join us today. Welcome, Lou. How are you?
How are we doing? I'm very good. How are we doing this morning? I'm cold this morning.
Yeah,
Like
it is
everybody else.
cold. It is cold. But the next few days are supposed to be much warmer. So hang
Excellent.
in there.
Mm-hmm.
So, friends, we are actually, we have just crossed the century mark. We are now today at episode 101. I'm very happy and proud that I've gone beyond 100. It seems like time flew very quickly.
Yes, we've been going through it, and I want to mention here that the response that we've gotten to these episodes, the response on Facebook, of people contacting us mostly through Facebook, but lots of great listens on our podcast as well. The response has been outstanding. People are involved, and people are talking to us, and it's helping them. They seem to be enjoying them and being helped by them, and that makes us feel good too. So we appreciate when you people talk to us. We like that.
Yeah, and it's on Facebook, it's on YouTube, thanks to Lou. Lou has been managing this whole thing. He's got it on Facebook, he's got it on YouTube, he's got it on every possible podcast.
Yep, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, yeah, and many other places too.
Yeah, and we have a WhatsApp group also. And now Lou has arranged through somebody, a friend of ours, to transcribe every one of these lectures. So hopefully we'll be having it in written form also. Thank you, Mary. So today I'm going to follow up with what we did last time in episode 100. And if you haven't listened to 100, I would suggest that you do. But it raised a lot of questions among some of my friends and family. So I wanted to make sure that everybody's on the same page. First of all, we have to recognize that the concept of I am the body and there is within me a soul or a consciousness has to be eliminated. You're at the stage now, having listened to 100 of these episodes, that you have to recognize that this is going to be a mind shift that is phenomenal for you, a big mind shift. Okay, just be prepared for that.
Right.
So let's talk about Brahman and Atman first. So some people have become confused, as if Brahman is like our father up in the sky and Atman is like a son of the father inside us. That is not the case. So Brahman is everywhere. Brahman is omnipresent. So if you imagine that you are in an ocean, submerged in the ocean, and all around you is ocean water and inside you is ocean water, that also has an analogy been misunderstood. And now these are all analogies. So keep in mind carefully that the Atman and Brahman, even the scriptures say that you cannot, while you're in this lifetime, understand the whole complexity of Atman and Brahman. You cannot. You can only become the ocean. It's like saying to the river as it rushes towards the ocean, trying to tell it what it will feel like when it becomes the ocean.
Mm.
And the river cannot understand it. It can try and understand it, but it won't understand it until it becomes the ocean. So our scriptures tell us that there's no way you can tell a dreaming person that he is the waking person. You
Right.
just can't. You can only wake him up and then he can experience it for himself. So similarly, trying to tell a person who is embroiled in this day-to-day world, who knows how to turn on the computer and listen to Facebook and listen to my voice and so on, that you are Atman, you are Brahman, is going to be impossible. But try.
Mm-hmm.
So recognize that Brahman outside is Sat, Chit, and Anand. Sat means existence, Chit means consciousness, Anand means a complete and utter bliss. That's what the characteristics of Brahman are. So, what does existence mean? If I say this is a stapler, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does is mean? Is, this is a hard concept to understand, but that's what I told you. Brahman and Atman, very hard to understand. You can understand that this is my hand, but what is? So the existence of is, the isness is what Brahman is. Now, what is consciousness? Consciousness, when you talk about Brahman, is a consciousness of everything. It's the life force. When it comes inside Atman, and bliss, we can talk about I am happy, but what is happiness? So
Right.
happiness, unbridled happiness, is what Brahman is. Brahman is the isness. Brahman is consciousness. It is awareness. You can say I am aware, but is consciousness and awareness the same thing? No, it isn't. Awareness lies within consciousness. I am conscious of my awareness. There's a difference. I am conscious of the fact that I'm awake right now. I am conscious of the fact that I'm dreaming. I know when I'm dreaming, right? We've all had experiences where we have a frightening dream, and when it gets to a point where it's extremely frightening, part of us says, it's okay, you're just dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
You're not awake. You're not awake. You cannot recognize that this is a dream and that you're awake. But you are able to reassure yourself. Your consciousness tells you this is just a dream. I don't
Right.
know. I hope it's happened to all of you at some time. It's happened to me many times. There is wakefulness, there's dreaming, and there's deep sleep. Even in deep sleep, you are aware, because you say it when you wake up. You say, oh my God, I was in such a deep state of sleep. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know anything. I didn't hear anything.
Right.
So there's a consciousness. Now, when that Brahman is within us, which it is always within us, it's part of the Brahman and Atman. There's no separation. And I'll explain that. You may think that it's inside the body, but it's everywhere. The body is part of consciousness. That the consciousness within us, we say, I see, I smell, I hear, I touch, I taste.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, what is it that you're saying? You're saying, I taste, which means that there is an I beyond the tongue. It's not your tongue that's tasting, it is I that feels it. I've
Right.
given this example before, that if my wife is talking to me, I'm engrossed in something, the sound waves are going through my ear and it's listening, but my mind isn't there, my consciousness isn't there. So she says, what's wrong with you? Can't you hear me? And I said, what did you say? I heard what she said, but my mind wasn't registering it. And who looks at the mind? It is the consciousness. Consciousness recognizes the mind. So again, the consciousness is the one thing that is beyond all of the rest. There's the eyes, there's the mind. You need the eyes and you need the mind. You need the ears and you need the mind in order to have this perception. And the consciousness needs to be aware of what's going on through the mind.
I learned of it as the observer position.
It is exactly what is termed in Sanskrit is the witness.
Mm-hmm.
It's called sakshi. Sakshi means the witness. So consciousness is a witness. Now, recognize, and this is all important, because when we get to the point where I'm making some really profound observations from what I've learned to you, you'll understand this. There is in everything a subject and an object, right? I'm the subject when I'm watching something, I'm
Right.
looking at something. I'm the subject, I am witnessing the stapler. The stapler is the object. Now, if my consciousness says I am aware that my wife is calling me, then my wife, the sound waves, my ear, my mind even, is the object, and the subject is the consciousness. Now, you can never say, I am aware of my consciousness. Never, because you are
Right.
consciousness.
Yeah.
So if you're consciousness, you are the subject, you're not the object. Okay, keep that very clearly in mind, because people often say there's consciousness within me. That's not, can't be true, because you are consciousness. It's like running all over and saying, where am I? Where am I? I want to get myself. When you're there, you tat twamasi, aham brahmasmi. You are that tatvamasi, very major stipulation on the part of the scriptures. You are Brahman, tatvamasi, aham brahmasmi. I am Brahman.
It's about understanding you are not your thoughts. You're observing your thoughts.
That is right. You are not your thought. You're so. What that also means.
It's the difference between saying I am angry and I feel angry.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
There's a difference between yes, but the emotions are what you perceive.
Right.
What you perceive. The thing perceiving your anger, your
Right.
feelings, is the consciousness.
Right.
So the mind is then an object, feelings are objects, perceptions are objects,
Yes.
all of these things are objects. Now, the reason I'm explaining this is because these are the things, the objects that leave the body upon death. So we'll get to that. So we said, I can see, I can smell, I can hear, I can taste, I can touch. I'm not the eyes, I'm not the nose, I am consciousness, I'm not the mind. I am the witness, the sakshi. Consciousness lights up the mind. That is the key here. It's like illumines. It's the word in Sanskrit is it illumines the mind. You cannot know consciousness. You cannot be the object. You cannot be the subject. The consciousness is the subject. It cannot be the object. It's like saying I have a flashlight and I'm flashing it on something. And the flashlight you can use to see everything, but the one thing it cannot do is to put light on itself.
Right.
The eyes can see everything, binoculars can see everything. What it can't do is see itself. The eyes cannot see itself. There is a story in the scriptures about 10 young students were studying under a Swami who need to cross a river and go to the other side. And as they cross, have you heard this story, Lou?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. 10 students go across the river, get to the other side. They're soaking wet. They come up and they say, well, maybe we should make sure, because Swami said to be careful. Let me count to make sure everybody's here. So the first one starts counting. He said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And he said, oh my God, only 9 people. Oh, he starts crying. There's one person missing. Second one says, no, let me count. You counted wrong. He counts as 9 people. All of them count. They all drop to the ground saying, oh, one of us is dead.
Yeah.
A passerby says, you forgot to count yourself.
Yeah.
So this is a very, very important story in the scriptures. It keeps coming up all the time. What the story tells us is that we forget always to look at ourselves in the consideration of consciousness, Brahman, Atman.
Right.
We are ourselves. So we don't look at ourselves as us. We look at everything else. We think
Right.
that everything is outside of us. So that's the story about that. So it is the eye seeing other things. The eye cannot see itself. If I am consciousness and there are billions of consciousness outside, right?
Mm-hmm.
Conscious beings having consciousness, is there one consciousness, which is one Brahman, or multiple consciousness all over? It's like a lamp, a clay pot. You have multiple holes in the clay pot. I don't know if you've seen in India, we have these pots where you put a bulb inside, and when you hang it up, through each hole comes light.
Yes.
Multiple lights, and it flashes, goes all over the ceiling and the walls. It looks pretty. So in this case, the example shows that the light itself is only one, but it shows up as many, many ones. So these examples are called drishtanta. Drishtanta in Sanskrit means a metaphor. And these metaphors are like pictures through which you can understand the examples being given, because it's hard to understand without it.
Right.
However, I was giving this example elsewhere where if you give an example, you can't take that example too far. It's just an example just for that limited period. For example, if I say this warrior is very brave, very brave. How brave is he? He's as brave as a lion. He's a lion. On his shield should be a photograph, picture of a lion.
Right.
And then somebody comes and says, where's his four legs and his tail if he's a lion?
Yeah.
So you can't take it to an extreme. You have to recognize that these metaphors all get arrested at a certain point.
Yeah, this isn't literal. Don't be too literal.
Right.
Yeah.
So another drishtanta that talks about this is the example of Brahman shining down upon life. Now, the example of the sun is a good one, although there's a difference in that the sun is one planet that gives a lot of radiant heat and a lot of radiant light, right? We all know that. The sun is up in the sky, it gives light and it gives heat. As it falls on a stone, after a while, the stone gets lit up. You can see it clearly after the sun rises. And as the day goes on, the sun gets nice, the stone gets nice and hot. But it doesn't come to life, right? You don't see a reflection of the sun in that life. But if you took a wooden barrel and you cut it in half and made a nice sturdy bucket out of it, and it was filled with clear water, as the sun fell on that water in the bucket, what would happen? The bucket, the water would start to get a little warmer. If the sun is bright, it's middle of summer. The wooden bucket would get warm. The water would get warm. There would be light inside it. There would be heat. But in addition, the water would reflect the sun. You would actually see, as if you're looking through the water, you see the clouds in there, you see the sun.
Right.
The example that the scriptures say is that this is considered an example where Brahman is shining down on a sentient being, and that is like the filament in a bulb that gives life. So electricity, when it goes into a bulb, if it has a nice intact filament, the bulb lights up and you get light. But if the filament isn't there, you can have a plain empty glass bowl and put electricity in there and no light is going to be produced. It has to have that sentient object, that filament, in order for that electricity to light it up. So if this body is a bucket, if inside it that filament, that sentient object is not there, Brahman coming into contact with it does not produce life, right? So you have to have, let's say, a sperm and an ovum. In order for it to come together, there has to be something in there that we don't know what it is that produces life.
Right.
A seed, a mango seed, you put it in the ground. I don't know if you've ever seen a mango seed, Lou. It's pretty big.
Yeah.
But any seed, apple seed, whatever, it has to have certain things inside that we don't know. Science may even be able to duplicate these seeds, but you have to put it in the ground. You have to cover it with dirt. You have to water it. You have to give it sunlight in order for life to come about. And we see it. We find that quite surprising, and it's a marvel how life comes about.
Yeah.
But what happens? The life, the force of life, Brahman, Atman, consciousness, sees that this is a sentient object that life can be produced, and green leaves start to come out of it. Important. Sorry if I'm confusing you or taking you too far down the path, but it is important that not everything upon which Atman Brahman shines produces life. So Brahman comes into a rock, into a mountain, into sand, into dirt, clay. No life is produced. The bucket that we were talking about, if the water seeps out, the bucket becomes 80 years old, it develops cracks in it, the water seeps out, no longer is the bucket reflecting the sun. The sun is still shining on it. The body, after we die, Atman is still touching it. Brahman is still touching it, but there's no life in it. So consciousness, Atman, Brahman, exists everywhere. Mountains, stones, sand. But there's no mind inside it. There's no what is known as a subtle body.
Right.
The subtle body is in Sanskrit called Sukshma Sharira. Sukshma is milder. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? And the Sharira is body. So it's a subconscious, it's a subtle body. Subtle is the word I'm looking
Subtle.
for.
Yeah.
Subtle body that is there. And in the scriptures, it says that these subtle body is also known as the antakarana. So it's prana, the mind, the intellect, mana, buddhi, and the memories, the vasanas, all of these are part of the subtle body. When Atman touches it, it comes to life. When the body dies, the bucket dies, this is no longer able to use that body. The body has been there. It's no longer able to use the body. Do not think about it in leaving the body and going away like in the olden days you used
Right.
to think.
Yeah.
There's no soul. Somebody sent me on WhatsApp a doctored video that showed a car accident where a guy was standing outside and they showed him actually being hit by the car. He drops to the floor and then he shows like a little wisp of smoke coming out
Right.
of this guy's body, looking like a human being standing there. Some photographer had done it, looking down at the body. It was gross. And the person said, look, I wanted to show you how the soul comes out of the body. I said, this is ridiculous.
Right. Yeah.
Because the soul is not in the form of a human body. The soul is everywhere. The Atman is everywhere. So Atman never actually leaves. It's always there. But somebody asked if the Atman and Brahman after the death merge together. No. And the reason is that this Atman is filled with karmas and vasanas. It
Mhm.
has the karma, as you saw from episode 100, the karma means this existing Atman has, not the Atman, sorry, the entity, the Dehi, the entity that was existing inside the body did a lot of karmas, good karmas and bad karmas.
Right.
He's owed a lot of good, and he owes a lot to be done to him as punishment for the bad he's done.
Right.
That has to be paid. He cannot, at that point, that portion of the subtle body cannot merge into with Brahman until he pays his dues. Number one. Number two, there are vasanas that every time he has a wish, a desire, and it's stored as a vasana, those vasanas have to be fulfilled. In order to become self-realized, he has to take millions of births before he can fulfill his vasanas, get rid of them, and become self-realized. Until that time, that subconscious, that subtle body will have to keep coming back to life. So another question that Mary asked was, what happens in the interim? If the body dies, and the body dies, by the way, keep this in mind, when it can no longer fulfill the vasanas of the indwelling body, the indwelling subtle body.
Right.
The Dehi that occupies the Deha, the indwelling person, has vasanas, has desires. When the body can no longer meet those desires, then the indwelling being says, I got to get myself a new body. The body is then dropped. The inner portion, the Atman, is stationary, doesn't move, then takes on another body. How does that take place? That we'll get to.
Mm-hmm.
Now, recognize that there is consciousness, as we said, which is shining down as Atman Brahman, and there is matter. This whole body is all matter.
Right.
These are basically just what we've talked about is the five matter. And there you can actually analyze this. You could perhaps make this even in a library, in a laboratory. And I think they do when they say that you use these scanners, they're now able to manufacture body parts, but they cannot put life in it.
Right.
You can transplant various things, but you cannot put life into it. So there's matter and there's consciousness. There's two different things. So the question then becomes, what came first? And did the second one come because of the first? So did consciousness come first? And as a result, consciousness produce matter? A lot of people say yes, that is, the consciousness is strong enough to produce matter. And that's one theory. But it has been shown that that is not the case. The consciousness does not produce matter, number one. The second theory is that matter produces consciousness, that the world itself produces consciousness. The first one, where consciousness, which is God, we could call it God, uh, produces matter. All religions, most religions say that is the case, that
Right.
God created the universe, God created the world, God created man, right? The second theory is that matter produces consciousness. Matter is there, and because it needs to start thinking, it produces consciousness. That is not true. That's the analogy that the 10th student is missing, etc. The third is that they're both concomitantly present and they coexist. And there's many reasons why that can't be true, which will take us into a whole other area. The fourth is what is most widely believed to be true. And this is the part, after all of this, that is going to be at the heart of what we're talking about today. So remember, subject, object. Remember, we talked about Brahman coming as Atman, but it's all in one, like an ocean. There's
Right.
no separation between Atman and Brahman. Remember that we, as sentient, subtle bodies, get the Atman to touch base with it, the filament and the electricity, and we have developed life. Now, consciousness and matter, they're two different things, right? The theory that is the fourth one is that consciousness actually produces matter the same way as a wave produces ocean, an ocean produces a wave, and the same way that our waking mind produces a dream. Bear with me. I know that's very hard to recognize and understand, but that's what this is. You cannot understand Brahman and Atman. You have to keep thinking about it over and over again. But you can only become the Brahman. But if you keep going it over and over again, it starts to have faint understanding.
Right.
Lou, am I going too far astray? Do you see where I'm headed with this?
No, I'm hanging on here. I'm following.
Hanging on. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, good. Um, I grew up being told again and again that this world is Maya, means it's an illusion. It's not really there. Now, I always said that doesn't make sense. This is real. I feel it. What are you talking about? I can feel myself. This is not imaginary, but it's in a different context that as you start to study this, you can understand that consciousness actually produces the universe. The universe exists within our consciousness. The bodies, matter, everything exists within our consciousness. I hope you're with me, following me so far. So, in a dream, what produces the dream? The waking mind produces the dream. When you're asleep and you're thinking of the dream seems so real to you.
Right.
You say, well, where did this city come from? Where did this person? I felt myself. I felt my arm being cut off. I could actually feel it. I could, my grandson was saying to me the other day, I peed in my sleep. I thought I was in the bathroom, and I was really believed I was in the bathroom, and I peed, and I felt embarrassed because my bed got all wet. And I said to him that, from a psychiatrist standpoint, that he was so tired and he needed to sleep, and his body just said, listen, just imagine you're in the bathroom, you're going here, and you peed, don't worry about it, these things happen occasionally. But that's what happens in a dream. The waking mind is so powerful, it produces the image of a bathroom where the person is standing, and the waking mind says, it's okay, go ahead, urinate, you're in a bathroom, and he does. So there are many examples, and that's what actually got me into the study of the mind and psychiatry in the first place, going back to age 20 when I read Freud's book, Interpretation of Dreams. But it's come a long way since then. And what I'm
I think
saying now,
one
sorry?
tangible example, and you can check me on this, that I've learned in the past, and it's kind of a stunning thing to realize. Small, but it's kind of stunning. Is that colors don't exist. If you were to see something outside of your mind and your sense organs, your eyes in this case, there wouldn't be a red, there wouldn't be a blue. It's the way our mind interprets the frequency that comes into us. So
Well,
the illusion of the color is an illusion. It only exists in our minds.
yeah, it's how we perceive.
Yeah,
I don't know about that particular example, but what you're saying is that all of these, I mean, color, we know if you take light and you pass it through a prism, it comes into different things. And essentially, our eyes visualize it. We know that if you move lights around, if you move things, your eyes can perceive it. And we've
right.
seen so many examples of where you say a dress, is this gold or is this silver or something
Right,
like that?
exactly. Yeah,
And people have different perceptions of it. So again, it's the mind, it's the eye, it's the retina, and ultimately it's the consciousness that perceives this. But I'm actually talking about something totally different.
okay,
That the whole concept of mind, eyes, body, color itself is all made and formed by consciousness.
yeah,
That even the whole body is created by the consciousness. Now, does it really exist, is what you're saying? Does color really exist? Does the body really exist? Now, it's the same thing as you said when we were doing episode 100. If a tree falls in the forest and
right.
nobody's there to witness this, did it really fall? Now, do we know how old this universe is? How long does it go back? We don't know, right?
No, no.
It goes back to infinity. Now, how far does it extend? As I said once before, it goes for 1 light year, such a great distance, but it goes for infinite light years. Is that even possible?
Yeah,
So, who created the universe? What was there before the universe? If you start thinking all these things, it gets impossible to answer. But the one way you can answer it is about this being all a part of consciousness. It's hard to get your arms around it. It's very hard. No scientist has ever gotten around it. But
right.
the ancient sages came up with this theory, and it seems to fit the most of any. Otherwise, if you say, well, I don't believe it, okay, fine. I'm ready to believe what you believe. Tell me what you think. If you come up with a better answer, I'm ready to listen to it. So then the question is that Lou asked me before we started, how did these rishis and munis and sages of the past, going back like 8,000, 10,000 years, how did they even recognize this? We're just coming to grips with it now.
Right.
This whole subject of consciousness is coming up of vogue today. Everywhere people are talking about what is consciousness. And what we are saying right now is that consciousness is Brahman, consciousness is Atman. So in Western studies, they're coming up with newer, and it's so complicated to understand. But I'm giving you sort of like a primer today for you to recognize. And then if you want further interest, read up on consciousness theory. What Lou asked me before is, how did these rishis and munis know all of this back then? Important question. And if I didn't answer it, I'll answer it today. If I answered it once before, then here it is again. What they said is, we talked about this in the last episode, that there are vrittis. Our conscious mind is part of this entire consciousness around us. The consciousness around us is infinitely powerful. We have consciousness within us that is infinitely powerful,
Hmm.
but because of our distractions, those distractions are called vrittis in Sanskrit. Because of our distractions, our consciousness is not at the level of the infinite consciousness, right? So our consciousness basically stops where our body stops. So our nerve endings is where the consciousness stops. I'm sitting on this chair. I can feel the chair. My consciousness stops at the edge of my body.
Hmm.
We've heard of phantom limbs, right? You cut off an
Sure.
arm
Yep.
over here and there's no arm here, but my consciousness still says that there's an arm there. I feel an itch. I can't get past this itch. I want to scratch it, but there's no arm there. The consciousness is going where it was thought to go, up to the consciousness.
Right.
Now, the consciousness then has distractions because, as I said, when my grandson was born and he had to get an injection, or not an injection, blood needed to be drawn from his foot. I
Right.
remember I was like heartbroken that this little baby smiling was going to get a blood drawn and he was going to cry.
Right.
And the nurse said, he's not going to cry. Watch. I said, done this. I've seen being done so many times. What are you telling me he's not going to cry? She took a little syringe and filled it with sugar water. And this, I guess, was a technique that they use all the time now. I had not heard of it or knew about it.
Yeah.
And she put the dropper in his mouth. And as she was poking him with the needle, she put a few drops of that sugar, sweet sugar water in his mouth.
Right.
The pain in the foot and the vritti of the sugar in his mouth came simultaneously.
Right.
The pain in his foot made one vritti on his consciousness, but the larger vritti was the sugar in his mouth. His eyes opened up wide, and she said, "Look at his reaction." She said to me, she said, "Look at his eyes when he feels the taste." And I looked, his eyes opened up wide when he felt that sugar sensation, and he did not cry. He didn't react to the pain sensation. Whereas every other child I've seen, howls and cries when they get that shot.
Sure.
Those vrittis, that was one vritti, the first taste of sugar for him. After that, then the mind says, whoa, that was good. I need it. First birthday, you try and keep the child away from sweets the whole first year. But then first birthday, everybody says, here, take a bite of cake, take a bite of cake. And the vrittis in his mind are like, his consciousness is just going crazy with these taste of sugar.
Right.
When an adolescent boy kisses a girl kisses a boy first time, that is a major vritti. There are many vrittis. All the five sense organs, they experience something beautiful, they have a vritti. The sense organs of action experience something first time, they have a vritti.
Mm-hmm.
What that does is, every time it distracts from and takes away from the power of the consciousness. Whereas these rishis, munis, sages would go up into the Himalayas, block out all temptation, close themselves in a state of meditation and meditate for years on end, years. Usually 12 years is the key for whatever reason. Every person, whether it be Jesus or Moses or Buddha, the number 12 comes up. And I haven't been able to find out why 12 is the magic number, but 12 years is what they meditate for. And at the end of 12 years, they come back with self-realization. But
Right.
for 12 years, they practice eliminating, blocking out those vrittis so that their conscious mind becomes so powerful without any distraction that their consciousness becomes one with the outside consciousness. Now, there was a young sage going back to like a few years after this AD began, like 600 AD or so, Adi Shankara. And he wrote some really phenomenal Sanskrit exposés and books that we still use and which are like groundbreaking. There's biographies written about him. And in the biographies, he died when he was 33, very young. In the biographies, it says that Adi Shankara could do astral travel. Astral travel means you leave your body, and they actually prescribe that when I'm in astral travel, I'm going to close the door, my body will be inside. Make sure they need that body to come back to, these sages. So they put a guard, one or more of their students outside the door to say, I'm going to be astral traveling. You stay outside, make sure that my body's okay. Because the worst thing is when you're not yet dead and your mind, your subtle body is traveling. Your body's on the floor and you're traveling around. And these rishis, munis, you may say that I don't believe in it. But they came back with tremendous insights and knowledge of things that they couldn't have known unless there was this astral travel. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who's done astral travel, but all I can say is that um, the rishis and munis knew the exact diameter of the sun, of the earth, the distance between the earth and the sun, the moons, the planets. They knew the speed of light. I can give you a whole list of everything that they accomplished, all the various world map. They knew that the Africa, what it was shaped like, England, what it was shaped like. They describe it, all of this. How could they have known this otherwise?
Right.
And what they described, and they said it very clearly, is that when you don't have the distractions of the vrittis in your mind, you can eliminate them. When you're meditating and your mind is all powerful as consciousness itself, you can come up with knowledge of things that nobody would ever know. And they said that this universe is Maya. This universe is something that consciousness projects, like a movie being projected on a screen. The movie appears very real, but it is just a movie being projected onto a screen. This world, this consciousness, this universe, ourself, this is all Maya. This is not real. And that's why when Alexander the Great, if you can call him that, came to India, and his teacher told him, he said, "What can I bring you from India? They have the ultimate wealth, anything, gold, diamonds, silks, peacocks, whatever you want, I can bring back." And he said, "Just bring me back one self-realized person."
Right.
And when he went to the woods and he found this self-realized person, he sent his captain there, and the self-realized person, I think they're called gymnosift, I don't remember, but the first word is gymno. Look it up on Google, Alexander the Great and Gymnofest. The captain caught him and said, "If you don't come with me," he said, "Come." He's totally naked, lying there in the grass, no possessions at all. And he said, "Alexander wants to see you." And he said, "Well, tell Alexander to come here." And he said, "No, you come with me, otherwise I'm going to cut off your head." He says, "Go ahead. It's not my head.
Right.
You can't touch me. I am consciousness," is what he said. "I'm consciousness. You can't touch me. You can cut off the head, but that's on me." And he went back to Alexander, said, "No, no, no, don't touch him. He's a self-realized soul. Bring him to me." Or he said, "No, you bring Alexander to me." Ultimately, he didn't go to Greece, this
Right.
and ultimately he didn't go. But the point that he went back, I don't remember who, was it Aristotle or Pluto? I don't remember who it
Yeah.
was. I can look it up. Do you know, Lou?
No, I don't offhand. No.
Yeah. So he said, no, no, that's what these self-realized people do. You can't bribe them, you can't
Right.
threaten them. Nothing happens because they. But those are the kind of people that basically told us that the Sanskrit word is neti neti. No, no, not existent, not existent. They say, is this world, this universe, this body, everything is just an illusion, just an illusion, Maya.
Wow.
I hope I didn't confuse everybody, Lou. What do you think?
No, I got some of the concepts. Like I said, I was hanging on the middle there, but I got a lot of the concepts in the end. It's about lowering. They achieve this by lowering the distractions of their world and their quote unquote existence, and just lowering the static so that they could see more clearly.
That's right.
Yeah.
So yeah, without the distractions, and by the way, they would sit in meditation in the mountains, in the Himalayas, where nobody exists, where there's snow and ice. They would sit there completely naked, and the snow. And there's videos on Google. You can look at it, of these on YouTube, sitting there totally naked in snow, and nothing bothers them because their
Yeah.
consciousness is somewhere else. And in the scriptures, they give stories of beautiful maidens that are sent there to distract them. Various gods say, "I don't want this person to meditate so much. He's going to be more powerful than me,"
Yeah.
says the king of the gods. And so he transforms himself into a woman, a beautiful woman, goes there to distract him. And then these sages open their eyes because they're disturbed, and they get so angry because their vrittis come racing back. And some of them actually succumb to the temptation, and some of them burn these maidens to ashes, is how the story goes.
Mhm.
But the stories are symbolic to tell us, look, even these sages get tempted and they succumb. So you have to be very careful when it comes to these temptations. Temptations are there. We are all human. We all succumb. But even these sages succumb. But the difference is when they're without in their meditation, they're completely uh, consciousness. They're Brahman. But when they come back, they become human again, is the point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
Now, one question that somebody asked is what happens when the body is dropped? I say died, but basically the body is dropped is the terms that are used in Sanskrit. When the body is dropped and the subtle body is waiting for another body, where does it go? Does it go to heaven? Does it go to hell? And I've said this before, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't move. Atman doesn't move.
Right.
Atman remains. The subtle body also doesn't go anywhere. It is exists. It's like, there's no form to it. So you have to understand that none of this has any form. It's not
Right.
like a filament in a bulb that has a form. So you say, where does my thought go when I wake up? Where does the dream go? That's like asking, where does the dream go when I wake up? It doesn't go anywhere because it wasn't there in the first place. These vasanas, these karmas, these thoughts, these things that make you get born again, they don't go anywhere. They're just, how do they exist? I don't know. I don't know in what form they exist. But then Atman takes on the subtle body, gives it life, and it comes into a new body. Now, does a consciousness make that body? Is what I'm saying. So the body comes about, a new bucket comes about. This subtle body goes into that as if it's a pool of water. Now, when I say go into that, it doesn't mean that I'm saying it like flows into it like a form or whatever. So I think you understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
All right. Did I drag this on too long, Lou?
Nope. Nope. I think it's
My
all interesting stuff.
apologies.
I think it's like the previous episode. It's something that we're going to have to sit with and absorb and process. Right.
Yeah, I hope you are understand. I hope you recognize what I'm talking about, friends. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me in any way you can, and I'll be happy to answer whatever I know. And if I don't, I'll try and find out from somebody who knows and get back to you with answers. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.